Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Stanley. This is their part number SDRD2068 full mortise spring hinge. This is a 4x4 spring hinge, and it is it's a hinge admittedly that we don't know much about because it doesn't show up in our product catalog, but we have had clients in the past call up and literally read us this part number that's on the back side of there. And there is an image down below that we'll look at in a moment that will allow you to see that part number. SDRD2068R, I believe is what it says. And it's clearly a spring hinge. It's from their 2060 series of spring hinges. And it is clearly for a residential application. And as a result of it being a residential application, with Stanley having manufactured doors in the past and having many other divisions, we deal with only one component of Stanley. They've broken it up into, for me, Stanley was always just hinges. Well, then it became lock sets and door closers and exit devices. And now Best and Precision and Dorma and Kaba are all tossed into it. So admittedly, we don't have much information in a printed form of what this hinge is, even if there is any, because I bet that someone like, Stanley's door division would contact Stanley's hinge division and say, hey, I need 100,000 of these hinges now, and then I want to have 20,000 every 2 months after that. And it's probably just something like that. However, with that part number, we can contact Stanley, and they'll say, yep, we know what that is. Here it is. So the purpose of this video is to really serve as visual and dimensional evidence of the item. This is a spring hinge, and this is what it's going to look like basically when the tension is removed as much as possible. But otherwise, it would basically look like that. Okay. Let's put some dimensional properties on this. It's 4 inch tall. Now the overall width of the hinge is also 4 inch. Okay. This is a zinc dichromate over steel. Zinc dichromate will give you a gold look. It is a corrosion-resistant sort of coating that they've put on the hinge. It'll look streaky and gold. You can see it's not consistent, but some people say, yeah, I need one of those brass hinges. Well, when it comes to residential hinges, it could be zinc dichromate because of how often you see those. And that code is 604, even though they don't state that here. It might be part of the ST4C. The thickness of the leaf is .095, but it's probably supposed to be 096 is what that leaf thickness is. Now, we're going to also put a tape measure on our leaves here where you can study where those hinge locations are for the screws, and I believe that we've got a document down below. So just moving that tape measure back and forth. Okay. You've got a 5/8 radius by square corner, and the corners will most certainly be a distinguishing feature. Square corner by radius. That's a 5/8 radius. There are two radiuses. There's a 1/4 inch radius, and then there's a 5/8 radius. 1/4 inch radius is probably closer to a nickel. This is probably closer to a $0.50 would be my guess in terms of what that radius looks like. Okay, then square corner. And you'll note that these hinge locations are not the same on each leaf, so we'll put it over on the square leaf. You can pause this video to look at these dimensions as I go through it. And the purpose of providing these dimensions is so that you can compare that against what it is that you have, with the intention of being able to accurately determine that this is or is not the hinge that you need. And if it's off a little bit, it wouldn't be the end of the world because you could drill holes and redowel everything, although that is likely not what you have in mind in terms of this project and what it could potentially turn into. So you can see some dimensions there. You're also going to notice the UL stamp that's on the back, and we'll look at that photograph as well. If you have a fire door, if you have a fire-rated door and you and the door is by code mandated to be a fire-rated opening, you'll have to have a self-closing device. It can be an overhead closer. It could be any type of hydraulic or pneumatic sort of closing device. It could also be spring hinges, but code will say that spring hinges must bear visual evidence of their compliance with the fire test. That means that it's labeled. It's actually labeled. It has a stamp on it. It's listed, meaning that this product, should you call the testing laboratory and ask that they pull up information on whatever that R number is that's just too small for me to see, they'll have documentation that says, oh yeah, Stanley or whomever, submitted the hinge for testing, blah blah blah, here was the test. Not that you would call the laboratory, you wouldn't, but there's paperwork on file attesting to the fact that this has been tested and passed. That then gives Stanley the right to stamp that hinge. That says, yes, we're good to go, because code, as I said earlier, is going to require that it be stamped when it's a spring hinge. There's other requirements when it comes to spring hinges: maximum door size, quantity of spring hinges, size, and whatnot. But nonetheless, this hinge is completely compliant. Now, why are you looking for this hinge? Let's talk about that now. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. You're looking at this hinge because you need to replace one, and you've gotten so far as to determine, well, yeah, it says Stanley, and then you got your little magnifying glass out and saw that part number, and then you did an online search and likely found our site. Why would you be buying it? Well, why would you be needing to purchase this hinge, I should say? Well, because it's particular. You've got square by 5/8 radius, then you have this unusual hole pattern. And I say unusual because this zigzag pattern, there could be 12 different patterns that exist, and they all are zigzag, and even some of them are radius corner by square corner. But you're going to need this hinge because you don't want to fuss with the location of the screw holes. Now, if it's off a 32nd of an inch, who cares? If it's off an eighth, now your hinge screw is not going to sit flush there. And speaking of that, I'll show you the hinge screws now. Okay, screws are included. They apparently have 2, 4. Okay, so they have all machine screws and all wood screws. Here is what they have. Okay. And one more note about these screws is there are thread forming tips to the machine screws, which it's hard to see, but there's a little notch cut in the end of that machine screw, and that's probably 1032, where you're going to be able to clear out any paint that's in the frame. And if you're dealing with a residential, metal-clad door with a steel edge, and you could be, certainly if it's fire-rated, and then a metal-clad type of frame, there'll be paint that'll be in there. But then on the screws, the wood screws, you have what it's called fly cut. It's the same sort of... Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong way. This fly cut area right here, that's meant to help prevent splitting of the wood, as the machinery, when they're building these pre-hungs, is just running those screws in hyper fast. They should be pre-drilled. I don't really know the steps of how pre-hung or pre-hanging door manufacturers will work, but those fly cut screws are meant to help certainly deter splitting. So that's the screw package. This came with all wood screws and all machine screws. I would encourage you to indicate at the time of order what type of screws you want, or tell us the composition of the door and frame. The factory sent enough to do regardless of what the composition is of the door and or frame, but we don't want to assume that's how they always send them, so we should define that to them. You've got all machine screws, very common, very likely. You could have all wood screws as well. Okay, so the screws are in the bag. You're going to get a piece of perforated cardboard. This perforated cardboard helps insulate the hinges from each other when they stack them in a box. And there are generally, with this hinge, if you order 3, they'll usually ship in a single box, but the hinge is priced and sold per hinge. Not per pair, not per box, just per hinge. These shims can be used, this perforated cardboard can be used as a shim, but not when you have a fire door. You can't use something combustible or flammable like that. We do have pieces of steel, and a shim would have to be steel to be compliant, that can act as a shim for you. But that's what that's for. And actually, the factory sells this perforated cardboard separately because people buy cardboard shims all the time. So that's in the box. You're going to get this small machine screw. And that small machine screw is meant to go up here in the tension collar just to finish it off so that it looks flush like the other side when you're done adjusting the tension. Okay. Now, speaking of adjusting the tension, you're going to get a tension rod or an Allen wrench. You're going to get installation instructions and then a usage and selection chart. And we're going to look at this material on the screen. And let's switch now to the screen view. We'll look at the installation instructions and then we'll demonstrate it with the Allen wrench. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, here is the hinge that we are looking at. Not too much to see here, so let's switch over and take a look at the images that we have linked to down below. That shows what the box looks like. The contents of the box. That's a little closer up review of your hinge. That's where that machine screw will go down to and just finish that off. Okay, that clockwise is showing you the direction in which you will the direction in which you're going to increase tension as you tighten it. It really just ratchets forward, and we'll demonstrate that in a moment. That's your Stanley, along with your UL. It's a capital letter F versus a lowercase f. Capital letter F means positive pressure, and lowercase f means neutral pressure. That will probably not mean anything to you, nor should it, but it will to others. Showing the opposite leaf. And again, that's what zinc dichromate looks like. If you have a streaky gold tone hinge that's very inconsistent, it's zinc dichromate. Backside of the hinge, SDRD2068R. That's that part number that's there. And here's your UL information. 232R is what that looks like. Now, just because it's stamped doesn't mean you have a fire door. Doesn't mean you need, the exterior door of your home is not going to be a fire door, which means, you're looking for this UL or ULC, UL Canada listed hinge. You may not require it. However, you won't buy this hinge without it being UL listed. It's the only way they sell it, meaning they're all stamped. And then the components in the box without the hinge. Okay. Now, there are some customer-supplied images down below, really just providing this information so as to help other clients, determine what they're looking for. These are pictures from other folks who have sent them to us saying, this is the hinge I need. Great, here it is. There's also that template I had mentioned, and this will give you the location of the screw holes. And it does appear to be accurate. Reasonably accurate, if anything. Now you'll note one important thing is that the bottom of the leaf to the second hole on the square corner is different than what's on the radiused corner. Okay. There's also a link to the. Let's look at the installation instructions first. So this hinge is going to be set so that it's basically allowing the door to be open to 90 degrees. That's how you will set and hang the hinge and the door. What I'm saying is, the hinge it's going to be like that. Let's say your door is going to be over here, and then this will be your frame. Okay. Yeah, I drew that all wrong, didn't I? Sorry about that. I looked at that and said, that's not going to work. Here's what a frame might look like. Okay, here's your door. So you'll have access for your screwdriver this way or this way, is the bottom line. You don't need it to go to 180 degrees. You need it to just go to 90. So to increase the torque, close the door, engage the 5/32 of an inch hex wrench, and rotate it clockwise to increase the torque. Don't exceed 6 clicks. You'll hear the click. You can hear that as I do it on the hinge to the microphone. Okay. That's when that collar is pointed towards the top of the door. If you're going to be installing it where the collar is pointed towards the bottom of the door, you're going to turn it counterclockwise, obviously. To decrease the torque, what you need to do is put the wrench in place, and you need to push it down and then go backwards a little bit, and then actually what you need to do is to go forwards in the direction of the arrow and then release it backwards a little bit. You'll sort that out, and I'll demonstrate it on the camera in a moment. It's easy once you figure out how it works. Depress the ratchet, let the wrench rotate counterclockwise to the new setting. It doesn't actually work that easy. You have to kind of move it clockwise, and then it'll free up as you're pushing the wrench down. And then, of course, that screw I mentioned will go down to clean that off. You don't need to put that there, but if it's a fire-rated door, you do, because that's what the instructions say. Here is your size and guideline. This is a document. This is printed on the opposite side of our installation instructions. Okay, so there's not too much to see here, except that don't go bigger than, the size that they have listed here. But these guidelines are not necessarily for fire-rated doors. Yeah, they are not. They have no mention of fire doors here. So, for 70-pound doors, not bigger than 3070, you'll use one spring hinge with 2 anti-friction bearing hinges of the same size. The problem is this. Well, no, we do not have residential Stanley hinges that are going to be this exact match when it comes to leaf thickness and the positioning or location of this barrel. So this hinge and its exact size, you're going to use a spring hinge and mix it with non-spring hinges. We wouldn't have any hinges necessarily that are going to match that perfectly. So the only answer that we would have would be for you to buy all spring hinges. Unless, of course, you can find some non-spring Stanley hinges, which we don't supply. But they're giving you, one spring hinge for up to 70 pounds, 2 spring hinges for up to 115 pounds, 3 for 160 pounds. But none of this is for fire-rated work, is the bottom line. Now, if it's a fire-rated door, what we would refer to would be the NFPA 80 standard. Now, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take a look at NFPA 80, and I have a copy of the NFPA 80 here in my library. It is not a document that is free. It's something that the National Fire Protection Agency sells. But I'm going to open up my document. Oh, sorry. NFPA 80. Okay, let's do a search for spring hinge. And for some reason this is not indexing. Stand by. Okay, so I was able to find that page. It's in Chapter 6. And the bottom line is they go on to talk about spring hinges at NFPA 80. Spring hinges shall be labeled and shall meet the requirements of ANSI BHMA A156.17, and goes on to talk about the thickness, how many hinges you'll use, what the hinge is to be made of. And they do have some self-closing spring type hinges mentioned here. And what's important to note is that they've got a maximum door size listed here as 7 and a maximum width at 3. So 3 by 7 is going to be the maximum size. This is a 4-inch hinge, so 3 by 7. Then we've got a 4-inch hinge. And it's important to note that it does say things such as, you know, there will be a mention here that it says it has to be labeled. So it's a very handy document to be able to go through under this builder's hardware hinges and pivots section to see what the requirements are. And the reason I point this chart out to you is because it runs counter to what's listed here, which is clearly not for fire doors, because this is we're capped at 7-foot height. And since we're here, let's just quickly go over it. Hinges in under builder's hardware, section 6.4.3. Doors up to 60 inch shall be provided with 2 hinges and then an additional hinge for every 30 inch after. You can't exceed 30 inch between hinges. Where spring hinges are used, at least 2 must be provided. That's really important. If you have a fire door, you're using 2 spring hinges. Goes on to say that all hinges or pivots except spring hinges shall be of the ball bearing type. Hinges or pivots employing other anti-friction bearing surfaces shall be permitted, provided they meet the requirements of A156.1. Here's that table again. So far what we've learned is maximum door height 7 foot, maximum door width 3 foot. You got to have at least 2 hinges, and they got to be made of steel. Spring hinges shall be labeled and meet the requirements of A156.17. So we've also learned that when they say the word shall, that means must. Your spring hinge must be labeled. That's that stamp on the back of the hinge. Fire doors with hinges of lighter weight that are not of ball bearing type shall be permitted under the following conditions. They are part of a listed assembly. They meet the test requirements of A156.1 and have been tested to a minimum of 350,000 cycles. And all of that criteria is obviously met by this Stanley hinge. Pivots, intermediate pivots, the length, continuous hinges, attaching hinges to doors. Okay, so the bottom line is they also then go on to talk about even the screw type that you need. My suggestion is if you deal in the realm of codes and doors and other opening protectives, fire doors and other opening protectives, this NFPA 80 document would be well worth the investment. I refer to it constantly because it's impossible to remember everything. The other document that would go with this would be the document NFPA 101, and that is the life safety code, or well, life safety standard is what that is. That is egress, exiting buildings safely. So if you are in door work or construction work, 80 and 101 would very much be appropriate for your application as a resource document. Okay, so just to clarify what that is all about. Now let's switch back to the screen view, and if you leave this up, we'll take a look at how to adjust this hinge in terms of spring tension. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. So, when you have the hinge, however you have it, all you do is first close the door. It will ratchet to a certain degree. Now it's much more closed than it used to be. If I want to increase tension, and be mindful, watch your fingers, your skin in between these hinge leaves, because it will bite. You turn that clockwise, and now you're really increasing tension. I've increased it to the point where I would not be able to pull that open. It's just, there's too much tension. To decrease the tension, put that wrench in, it'll be seated down. Remember, that arrow is going clockwise. Push down a little clockwise, and then you can go backwards. Okay? That opened us up a little bit. Let's do it again. Put the wrench in, down, and then a little clockwise, and then you'll be able to go backwards. That's how I end up doing it. Yep. So a little English clockwise, and then you can go backwards is the bottom line, and that will work out just fine for you. That's how to set that. Let's switch back to the screen view, and let's take a closer look at the balance of the supporting documentation. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, and that's how we're going to set and increase and decrease our tension. You'll never get the hinge to 180, and that's okay. It's not needed, actually. Now, below this video here is a link to the manufacturer's page, and from that page, you'll be able to pull up not only all of the Stanley products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website. And by the way, that horizontal navigation is what will allow you to look at all the Stanley products. A link to the website. Then there are other encyclopedic documents that are here. The catalog that I'd like to refer you to is the 2010 Architectural Hardware Catalog. It's very dated at this point, but the bottom line is it is one heck of an encyclopedic document. Now, also what we have below here are two more documents. There's the product catalog and then the cut sheet. And this cut sheet is a reference to the Stanley spring hinges. Okay, so they don't have this exact spring hinge listed in the catalog in terms of it being an SDRD2068R, but you're going to be able to learn a little bit more about the construction of their spring hinges and how they work, etc. And that's why that is all listed here. Okay, and that will give you an overview. All right, let's wrap up this video on camera. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. In conclusion, the purpose of this video is to really serve as visual and dimensional evidence of the item, and hopefully this will allow you to say, yep, that's the hinge that I need, no doubt about it. What other finishes are available in this? I don't necessarily believe there's any restrictions. You should be able to order this in prime coat or, you know, your brasses, your bronze, your chromes, your nickels, satin, polished, oil rubbed, prime coat, black. Reach out to us if there's a finish that you need, and we'll speak to Stanley about the availability of that. I've not seen it in any other finishes, but those images linked to down below clearly show a painted hinge and then a zinc dichromate hinge is the bottom line. So may not be available anything other than this sort of finish. Any questions on the SDRD2068 spring hinge from Stanley or any other Stanley product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.